really touched on it this morning. It was so amazing. It's, for us to understand this concept, we need to understand that he doesn't need our help. So he initiates this thing. He says, I'm going to do something, and I want you to join me, but he doesn't need our help. He chooses us. He longs for a relationship to do something with us. He calls us into this partnership, not because he needs us, but because he wants us. And it's a really humbling thing to understand that when God's calling us, it's out of a place of desire for him. When he says he adopted us into a family, it says he did it because it gave him great pleasure. It gives him great pleasure to call us and to partner with us. And the second thing is God invites us to join him. You see, he's already at work. He is already working. In Psalms, it says that he's a God who doesn't sleep or slumber. And it's talking about the protection and the provision of Israel, but it's also talking about his will. He's always at work. He's accomplishing his purposes. Since the beginning of time, God has been working out his will, and nothing will stop him. It says the gates of hell will not stop him. His will be accomplished. He's busy at work, and he calls us to join him. And this morning, we could, theologically unpack this, but we've been privileged enough as a church to see this outworking in our midst. We've seen this, so we're going to do things a little bit differently this morning, and we're going to share a bunch of testimony where hopefully, I'm hoping through all these different testimonies, which no one has been prepped on exactly what to say, we're going to see these two things in action. That God initiates the work, then he calls us to join him in what he's doing. Is that cool? So we want to see these two realities of experiencing God, but in action. So can I call the guys, the Lesotho guys, maybe up? Matt, Jess, where's Ash? Oh, there we go, Jesse's first. So we're gonna share some testimony, and I'm gonna share just a testimony of how this trip came into being. That it wasn't just a trip spur of the moment, but it was a couple of years in the making, this trip, and just how you see God at work. But maybe you guys first.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ash, and I think it's an honor for me just to stand here and just share what the Lord has done in the weekend that we went to Lesotho from my perspective. So it was very difficult for me to pick one thing to share about, so I just wanted to touch on a few things very briefly. So on the way to Lesotho, I didn't really know what to expect. So Shan asked us just to pray and ask the Lord to just put on our hearts what we want him to do for us. And my two requests in my quiet time was that I really wanted to pray for somebody that was sick, and I really wanted to conquer a fear. That was my two requests. So little did Joshi know he was the perfect candidate for my requests. So when he fell ill, the second day that we were there, it was amazing for me to just lay hands on him and just pray for him. So I was like, okay, Lord, that's one tick box done. And just when we were sort of scoping out the work that we needed to do to put the gutters on in the JoJo tank, Joshi was one of the guys first on the ladder to look over to see, okay, cool, we need to do this and this and this. So there was only about 2 or 3 of us that was actually going to go up on the ladder and work on the roof. And it was quite interesting because when Joshi fell ill, there's obviously no one to go up in his place. And I was like, okay, Lord, I know I'm really terrified of heights, Lord, but I know, maybe this isn't my time to conquer that fear right now. The next morning the ladder was up, and I just felt this compelling feeling in me to just climb this ladder. So I don't know how I made it to the top, but I made it to the top. And if you had to tell me a week before that I'd be on top of a roof with an angle grinder cutting aluminium sheets, I think you're going crazy. It was just amazing for me to see that the Lord sort of helped me fulfill those 2 requests that I'd asked him to in such a short space of time. So the next quick revelation for me was also, this was my first mission trip. So I was sort of in my quiet time, I was like, okay, Lord, my first mission trip, I'm going to put up gutters in a JoJo tank. I was like, my expectations were a bit higher, Lord. I don't know. You read about going and evangelizing the streets and, casting out demons, raising the dead. And I was like, Lord, I'm so excited. And I'm like, okay, gutters. quite interesting. And it was only while we were praying, just before we crossed the border into Lesotho, that it sort of, I think Shan mentioned about like the spiritual aspect of what we are actually going there to do. And it was quite interesting because on the face value, for me it was, okay, we're going to go and put up gutters and a Jojo tank to collect water. But spiritually, it was actually to allow for baptisms to take place in an area that's filled with witchcraft, and the enemy has got such a strong hold on this place. So it was almost like there was this war waging, and what we went to go and do was such a strong victory in that war. So the very last revelation that I wanted to touch on was the evening after we had gotten back. I was sort of in bed, and I was just looking at my hands, and I saw all the cuts from working with aluminium and the power tools and things like that. And I was almost praying like, Lord, I don't want these cuts to ever heal, because every time I look at my hands, I'll think about what I went out to go and do for the kingdom. And it just made me realize that our physical cuts and our physical wounds will always heal. But spiritually, we carry a lot of these battle scars from what we've done for the kingdom. In the movies, they always portray these warriors, these massive warriors with all these scars, and you know that they're the ones that you want to send into battle because they've got all the experience to show for it. And it also just made me realize that through all of our trials and tribulations, we carry spiritual scars to show for that. And these are our testimonies, actually. So physically, we might sit here as ordinary Christians, but spiritually, we are mighty warriors, with scars to show our victories with Christ. So I just had the urge to share this morning that we shouldn't hold back from sharing our stories with people that may or may not know the Lord. When the Holy Spirit places it on our hearts, we should be compelled to tell the stories that we have. So the power of our testimonies have the potential to move mountains, to change hearts, and to win wars. And I just wanted to encourage all of us to put up our hands and answer the call, also just to take part in mission trips. As from my perspective, it was such a life-changing experience, and I feel like that could be the case for a lot of us. So there's just one passage I wanted to end off with, and it's from 1 Peter 13, verse 15, or 2:15. And it says, "Now, who will want to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you suffer for doing what is right, God will reward you for it. So don't worry or be afraid of their threats. Instead, you must worship Christ as Lord your life. And if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it." Thanks.
Morning, everyone. I am a bit nervous, so excuse the voice if I... There we go. That was, I must say that ladder it looks fine, but I think you're supposed to have more reinforcement or on the sides, because it bent, when you climbed up. So, I went up 3 steps and I just said, forget it, I'm not going. So, there was just no ways I was going to go. I think overall the weekend was flip. If I could go tomorrow, I'd go tomorrow. It was just incredible. And I think probably just, the biggest walk away for me was just the confidence that the people had that we were engaging with and meeting with. And I think, coming to Plet, I've lacked confidence over the last 4 years, definitely. When someone asks you how was your weekend, you don't say, "Oh, church was actually incredible." You talk about other stuff. You just avoid it. And I think, it was not so much being ashamed, but it just lacking boldness of talking about God and what He's doing in my life at the time. And I think I just saw people that were just completely reliant and expectant and totally thankful for what God was doing for them and giving to them, on a daily basis. And just a small story. We had to go and fetch dinner on the second night. So Shannon was like, "Okay, let's go and collect it." And then the pastor, Matteo, also jumped in the car. I wasn't sure. I don't know if I even knew that we were going somewhere else. So we put the order in for for the Crispy King. It was amazing. And then we started driving. It was quite dark and late, and I was like, okay, well, sure. Where are we going? And I remember thinking, okay, we'll probably maybe just go see where this guy's staying. Maybe the soccer's on, and we can just maybe just talk for a bit. And we were driving, and people were out and drinking and having a good time and doing all that. And I remember just driving, and then Matteo was just directing Shannon where to go. And we turned and turned and turned. Eventually, we came to this house, and I don't want not run down. It's just underdeveloped. Like the roads, the houses aren't finished. Animals running in the street, kids running around. It's just, I think, coming back here was just, we are so blessed. Anyway, we went to this guy's house, and I was expecting to go into his home, and then we arrived there, and it's actually a church which he has bought, or he's bought a building. He sold his house to do this church, and there were people singing at like 5:30 at night, and I think I was just totally blown away by the boldness of this guy. I forget what's his name, Teti, or what was his name? Yatanki. And I remember just being totally like blown away by what he has given up for God, and coming back to this, place that we're living in. Are we giving it up? Are we giving up what we've got? Are we declaring? Are we declaring who we are in Christ and what He's done for us on a daily basis? Because these guys are doing that. And I was just totally encouraged and challenged by what these guys are doing. So I encourage us all as well. Oh, and then I did read there was a verse, but actually I'm not going to. I want to read. My wife's got this Bible which I don't really look at much, but it's her Bible. So no, I can't. Anyway, it's just written very, very nicely. I just want to. It's Matthew 16 verse 24, but it's just written in a bit of it, and it doesn't even say the verse in here. So just bear with me. And when you take a picture and it's early, and then you've got the light, you've got the shadow and then you've got the shadow in the background. I was really trying to take this picture well. Anyway, let's try this again. Yeah, okay. Then Jesus went to work on his disciples. Oh, come on, man. Then Jesus went to work on his disciples. Anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You are not in the driver's seat, unless you're driving with me between Lesotho and here. I'm the driver. Do not run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me, and I will show you how. Self-help is not help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way, my way, to finding yourself, your true self. What kind of deal is it? See, now it's going into the shadow now. What kind of deal is it to get everything you want but lose yourself? What could you ever trade your soul for? Yeah, that was just very cool for us. Right. Who's next? Jesse.
Hello everybody. I haven't been here in a while, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jesse. Can I just say, the Lesotho trip would not have been the same without Matt. So my testimony of Lesotho... No, I'm fine. My testimony of Lesotho is quite different. It was more what God was doing in my heart throughout the whole experience. And it really is just humbling to see how run down everything is, first of all. Just to work with these guys and to partner with this church was such an incredible experience. But what God did in me was something that I've been trusting for a long time. So every Sunday, Josh and I come early to serve and to set up the sound system and everything so that everything's fine for church. And what that became for me was quite a religious thing. Because I didn't understand the heart behind it all. I was always just serving and, setting up everything, and it wasn't anything significant to me. And then on this trip, just going there, I was expectant, but I didn't know what God was going to do with me. But just serving and I don't know how to set up a gutter, so it was a whole new experience for me. But just serving and doing, like getting out of my comfort zone, and then also to see what it's working towards, helped me recognize the vision behind it. And I think just it was so incredible, like how God shifted my focus from we're building a gutter to we're providing a way for people to get baptized. And it's the same now when I'm serving. I can see the vision behind it. I can see hearts changing. I can see what God's going to do through that, not just the setting up. So yeah, that's what God did in my heart.
Joshua, you're going to come share your... So Josh just got absolutely sick. On the first night we got there, Friday night, he was vomiting from about 8 p.m. till like 3 o'clock the next day. So he was absolutely not helpful, useless. But so these, isn't that incredible? Just hearing what God does. So, these guys sacrifice finance, time, everything to go, but then, no one spoke about that. Everyone spoke about what they received. So they gave a lot, but spoke about nothing of what they gave, but only was able to speak about what they received, which is incredible. It's like you go to bless and you come away feeling blessed, changed, fulfilled, like something's happened. And I think for me, they were quite religious about everything. For me, it was a good jolt. It was just so much fun. And I think that's something sometimes we can overlook. That actually following Jesus, living this life, it's a fulfilled life. It's like it was a fun weekend. Like, I was chatting to people, oh, you must have been so tired. And I said, yeah, I was a little bit tired, but man, like my stomach was sore from laughing. It was just like we had such a good time. The trip there and back, the banter between the guys, it was amazing. It was fun. And I think, that's something we can sometimes overlook. Following Jesus is it's fun. You think you're missing out on something, but you're not, man. You receive so much more. It's a fulfilled life. But just quickly, a testimony I want to share just about how this trip came about. So it was about 2 years ago. We go once a year, and we went into Lesotho. It was a slightly different trip. It was a mission trip, so we were there to preach, and we did some street evangelism. So Mateo, the guy who leads the church there, we went out in the streets, and we were going to just go pray for some folks. Martin was actually with on that trip. Went into a witch doctor's hut. Decided to take my 10-year-old son with him, and we just went and prayed for this witch doctor. But so, they did a little bit more of the crazy stuff. Mateo had kind of prepped a few places that he wanted us to go pray, like, some local businessmen, some guys that were involved in the life of the church that he specifically wanted us just to go to them and pray for them and encourage them. And we went out and we started praying for people. And my standard thing when I meet someone new, how's it going? I was like, what are you trusting for? What can I trust with you? What can I pray for you? And it was I was quite shocked by the answer. Most of the guys were saying, man, they know Jesus and they've had an encounter with him, and they're wanting to live these lives to serve him, but they're struggling. Like they keep falling away. They keep choosing the wrong path, even though they know what the right path is. And it was just something that kind of stuck with me, while we were praying. It was probably like 80 to 90% of the answers was the same thing. Like, actually, we want to follow Jesus passionately, but are struggling to do so. And it kind of stuck with me, and I was thinking about it, and it just, at the time at church, we were having some baptisms in the life of the church, and I remember I was like super excited by what God was doing here. And I had that thought the whole time, and I was like, man, I'm sure it's baptism. Like these guys, they're doing this, but, so like in my head I was like, I must ask Mateo, the church and the churches in the region, like, how do you guys handle baptism? Because this sounds like a baptism issue, like, living this old life and not, living a new life, but not having the old washed away, and then you keep falling into the old. So in the weekend, I asked him about baptism, and then he just shared. He was like, no, it's actually really difficult in Lesotho for the guys to get baptized. They've got a few open bodies of water, but the guys will tell you it's quite polluted, it's quite dirty, so they can't do it in like the natural bodies of water. The municipal water is like crazy expensive, so to be able to get it is like a real mission. It's super expensive, so they've tried all sorts of things, but they hadn't been getting it right. And you know, they've been kind of they've been doing baptisms once a year because they have to all travel to a certain place to go and do it. So as a result, a lot of guys just weren't getting baptized. And I mean, he shared this with me, and I was like, immediately it was like, man, I'm so sure God's saying this is a baptism issue, but like I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. Like I heard it and everything. So came back afterwards to Plet, and it just didn't ever leave me. This thing. So like chatted to Charles about it and like mentioned it, and like I kind of I feel like I was almost telling Charles just to like get it off my plate so that I could move on. And the conversation, like Charles was like, yeah, you know, sounds, and then it was almost like, okay, so what are we gonna do? And I was like, oh, like I wasn't planning on doing anything, like I was just like sharing, and it wasn't like in those words, but that was kind of like the sense, like, okay, it's not just like, you know, God's saying something, God's doing something, He's stirring something. And then so, you know, we spoke about, even before speaking to Matteo again, we spoke about, you know, what could be done. So like just started dreaming a little bit, like, hey, what, you know, if we were to do something, what would it look like? And then we thought, and you know, actually, well, they've got this building, they've got catchment. If we put up a tank, you know, they can have rainwater, they can have a baptism. So we're like, okay, well, we've got a more or less plan of, you know, what it could be. But then Charles' encouragement was, okay, go back to Lesotho and chat to Matteo and make sure that it's something that they're desiring. So it's almost, and it's like, it's so important. There's good ideas and there's God ideas. And it's like, we want to work where God's working, where He's already started. He's taken the initiative. He started something, and then He calls us to join Him. That it's like, all of that would have been a good idea, but if it wasn't God's idea, it would have been a little bit of a waste, you know, because we had to hear, because if it's God's idea, He's speaking to us, He's speaking to them, He's already doing something, and then He calls us alongside. So we went back to Lesotho the next year, and, you know, spoke to Matteo and said, listen, Matteo, like, is this a desire you guys have as a church? Is like, you know, we've spoken about it and you said it was a need. Is it something you want? And like, there was a desperation from his side. It's like, man, they've been trying to figure it out. You know, finance has always been an issue. They've tried to go, there's a guest house that's got a swimming pool. You know, they've even tried to go to the guest house, but the guest house charges them, you know, $50 per person who wants to get in the water, $25 if you just want to watch. And he says it's like financially, it's just, you know, for people that are unemployed and don't have anything, it was becoming like hectic. So there was like this desperation from his side, like, no, this is what they want. And it was like, okay, maybe this is God, you know, God speaking. So like with our plan together, I started putting like a few, like just looking around and checking some costs, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's actually, this is quite an expensive little exercise. It's not quite a cheap thing. So then it's like there's this doubt that comes in and say, okay, God, maybe not. And it came to the church, and we made one plea, and we said, like, you know, this is what it is, this is what we think. You know, we believe this is what God's saying. And I think it was like the next day, there was money in the bank. 10 grand. And I remember thinking, like, you know, I wasn't expecting that. And, you know, at the time, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Like, you know, this is going to cover everything. But, you know, God's faithful, like with the little, because at that time, I mean, it was going to cost a lot more. But it was like that moment, I was like, it was the first confirmation. I was like, okay, God's doing something. Like, I thought this was going to be a big thing. You know, I was going to plan it, and then I was going to have to try and, you know, gather finance, like do this thing. And I was like, no, like the first big step was finance, and it's like God provided. It was almost immediate. And I was like, okay, that's a little bit of pressure off. Seeing God's already doing something, I'm just kind of coming along for this ride. And then over the next little while, I mean, there were like other amounts, you know, $2,000, $3,000, $100, like all towards Lesotho. And it was, you know, quite incredible, all the finance that was coming in for this trip, like, you know, building up. I mean, right up until, it was amazing, because they had to cast a slab before we arrived to put this JoJo tank on. So, I mean, the day of that they're busy casting the slab, someone messages and says, hey, I felt I was going to put money in for the cement for the slab on the day that they're pouring the slab. And it's like, man, that's incredible. Just the timing and the confirmation of God working, it's like unreal. But then started like this logistical thing of, because I mean, Lesotho, it's far, so it's 11 hours away. But like you sometimes don't, but it's another country. So there's a border between us. There's customs. There's like a lot of logistical stuff. So, what I thought was going to be, quite difficult in organizing actually became very difficult in organizing, because I was like, okay, so if I buy the stuff here, there's a good chance they're going to stop me at the border. There's going to be custom fees, because now I'm not just taking stuff to, I'm importing it. And it's like, okay, then it's like, okay, importing license. It's like, it became like this logistical thing that was, at first I was like, this is going to be difficult. And then it was like, okay, this is quite complicated too. Okay, this is now looking like it's not going to happen anymore. And then a businessman in the church works in Lesotho. Said, no problem, I'm doing work in Lesotho. One of the companies I represent, they can buy the stuff locally in Lesotho through this business, and we can sort it out afterwards. And I was like, immediately, like, there was this break of like something that was insanely complicated and difficult became easy again. So, I mean, the stuff got bought. What do you need? Give me a list. The list gets given. Okay, purchased. What, like, all sorts. And I was like, I don't understand how this is working, but it's working. It's like everything that I'm stressing about, God sorting out, He's making a way, and we literally just kind of going along. So the stuff gets delivered and sorted out in Lesotho. The businessman comes back to me and says, listen, I actually really want to go, can't, so this is my contribution. There's nothing, I've bought it all, it's there. So now we've got this money for Lesotho, but the stuff's been bought in Lesotho, it's already there, it's been delivered, it's been paid for. We've done nothing. It was incredible. So we started gathering a team. So I put out the word. It was the first time, we put out word for Lesotho, and a whole bunch of guys came back and said, yes, we're keen. And it was, I think it was the biggest response I've ever had for Lesotho. Bunch of guys, men just saying, yes, we want to get involved. And I was like, God, you're amazing. Like, you have pulled absolutely everything together. And I think it's when we work where God's working, He does the work. We join Him. And so He pulls this team together, and we're a bit of a mixed bag. In terms of skill, probably not the most skilled team around. So much so that 2 days before we were leaving, Josh and I are like on YouTube checking, okay, how do you fit gutters? Which is great, because we found this tutorial. We were like, oh man, like you get all the fittings, the ends. It's like easy. It's like Lego. You just clip it all together. I was like, man, it's so easy. And we get to Lesotho, and it's none of the PVC gutters. It's all metal. So we were expecting like that PVC gutter. You just like cut it with a hacksaw, and you add on the pieces, and it's so lacquer. And then it was like metal gutters, and we're like, oh, this is a problem. We didn't see this on YouTube. But it's like, even in that team that God built, it's we were like, okay, we actually really need a plumber. We didn't have someone who knew about plumbing. I certainly didn't know about plumbing. So like, okay, man, we actually need a plumber. And we didn't have anyone locally that wanted or that could come. And we went to Knysna for the combined meeting with Henny. And I went afterwards up to Nick Campbell. And I said, hey, Nick, don't you have a plumber in the church who would like to go on a mission? And he said, look, we don't have anyone who's a plumber, but we've got this guy. I don't know, he's quite handy. He's not a plumber. So I'm going to approach this guy to ask him to join me on a mission trip that's the very next weekend, and this is my pitch, is like, okay, we're going to drive. We're going to wake up early, 4 a.m. We're going to drive 11 hours there. We're going to get there late. We're going to sleep. Then we're going to wake up early, we're going to fit these gutters, we're going to go to church, and then we're going to drive 11 hours back, get back at 12 o'clock so that you can start your job again Monday morning and going. So already I'm like, oh, this is quite a tough pitch. And I go up to the guy, I say, I don't know, what are you doing next weekend? And he says, no, Bree, tell me, what are we doing? And I say, well, we're going to go to Lesotho and we're going to fit gutters. He says, I'm in. Like, that was the conversation. And I said to him, listen, pal, I think just check with your wife and let me know. And he says, no, she's going to say I'm in as well. So I'm telling you now, I'm in. And it was like incredible. I was like, man, the searches our heart, it was like God just providing everything we needed. I was like, so now we've got this team of guys that I'm really excited about. There's 6 of us. But now the next logistical challenge is I need to get the 6 of us to Lesotho. And like, so we start discussing, like, how are we gonna get to Lesotho? Cars and 2 cars and a car and a bakkie, or, what are we doing? And then, someone in the team says, no, it's going to be really great if we can travel together. So I said, I'll provide the vehicle. Hire a combi for all of us to travel in together. So it's like God, like down to the detail. And I think, traveling together was one of the highlights of the trip. It was just such a great experience. But like, God coming together and doing all of this. And I'm actively, I mentioned at the prayer meeting before we went, I was like, it's almost like I'm trying to find things to worry about. And every time I am, God's just, sorting stuff out. As I'm worrying about stuff, it's getting sorted out. It's getting sorted out. It's happening, and it's you really feel like you're in the grace of God. It's like you're operating in this grace of God. He's called you to do this very difficult, complicated thing, and it's not very difficult or complicated and not taking, that much effort. You have to sacrifice certain things to actually desire that and to put yourself in a position to receive it. But once you're there, man, there's nothing that can stop the grace of God. So it's like when you hear Him and you're in His will, it's, man, His grace carries you. There's nothing you have to do. So getting there, putting up this tank, we get there, look at the delivery for the first time, these metal gutters. I'm terrified. I'm like, man, I wasn't expecting this. Like, I was trying to plan as well as I could in my head, and I was like, okay, this is now, I've experienced God's grace, but now this is the stumbling block. I can look at these gutters in front of me, and I'm like, I have no idea. I've never even seen a metal gutter in South Africa. It's like, you've got those extrusion guys, and it looks so nice. The guys come with a track, and it just like they pull them out and they fit them, but it's not like those gutters. And like they've got like this limited amount of fittings that you're trying to do something that the gutters are not designed necessarily to do, and you're trying to make them do that thing. And also, there was a guy that came from Maseru, so an hour away. He drove down, he got there at 7 a.m. that morning, drove down, met us, and started, and he brought with him an angle grinder. We didn't have an angle grinder. And he had everything that we were missing, he had. So between the two of us, it was just, we had everything. Besides brackets. We went to the hardware store about 7 times for brackets. Every time the guys were like, okay, we need 3 more brackets. So then I said, okay, no, you need 3? Okay, cool. Come back with 5. And I said, okay, we're short 2. You need 2? Okay, come back with 10. And then we're still short. It was, brackets were the order of the day. Yeah, we had brackets. But it was just amazing to see this guy just also join and a heart to serve. And man, we cracked on. I was worried Josh was going to be one of the instrumental hands, but I do believe, I don't believe God made Josh sick on purpose. But Josh being sick made way for other guys. Other guys in the team recognized that actually people needed to step up. There was a hole, it's literally step up. There was a hole that needed to be filled, and guys were like, okay, well, no one else is going to, here I am. And, conquered fears, stepped out of comfort zones, did things that they didn't think they were capable of doing. They did. And, at the end of the day, we got this thing up. You guys were praying for rain. At about 3 o'clock on Saturday, it started to rain. We were about, I would say, probably 70% there. And it started to rain. And there was thunder and lightning, and I was like, actually, man, we want this rain, but not now. We need another 3 hours, and we can be done. And even Jesse was standing outside, and he was like, "This is the rain we've been praying for." And I was like, "Yes, Jesse, but not now." So, and it was amazing. And the rain stopped. The rain stopped. We were able to crack on. We finished probably about 6:30. I think it was about 6:30 that evening. With everything gutters up, made a plan, tank there, and we were like, okay, that was easy. Like, and it's like you stand back and you say, this is something none of us have ever done before. None of us thought we would ever do. But you stand back and you say, man, God, like, this is incredible. And it's probably the proudest gutter I'll ever put up. But it's you look, because and it's exactly what Jesse said. It's like you understand the reason behind what we're doing. We even prayed this morning at our setup team. It's like you have to have perspective of what we're doing. Everything we're doing is so that the church can just lead people to Jesus. God our Father has children, and some of them are far from Him, and He wants them close to Him. That we've been given this ministry of reconciliation. Our job is to reconcile people to their Father in heaven. And when we're doing any of this for any other reason than that, then we've lost our way. It's, when we're coming in, we're setting up these chairs just because church needs to happen. No, it absolutely doesn't. That's rubbish. There's people that are far from their Father, and He wants them back. And He's called us. He says, I need your help. I want your help. And that's all it is. So it's like understanding, going to Lesotho, putting up that tank and those gutters creates an opportunity for people to get baptized, that they can accept Jesus, they can be baptized, that old can be washed away, and they can start living new, fulfilled lives with God as at the center, experiencing Him in every day of their lives. And with all of this, it's God initiates the work, and He calls us to join Him, and we did, and we, at the end of the day, 6:30, that we looked at the gutter, and it was great, but the tank was empty. And you guys were praying. We prayed at the prayer meeting before. You guys prayed on the Sunday. We prayed there, and the tank was empty. And that's the one thing we couldn't do absolutely anything about. We could buy the gutters. We could cut. We could weld. We could fit. We couldn't bring the rain. And it's only God who starts a good thing. He brings it to completion. And I was just reminded, I know that's a different context, but it's like I was just like blown away. So receiving a message from Matteo, and I'm going to play the message. Most of us have seen it, but this is, can you play that?
Hey, Sandy, how's it? Yes, we can stop praying. We had so much rain. So much that the tank is now full. We can shut all the source of water now and use that one from the tank because it's even overflowing.
And that for me was just like, okay, God, like whatever you say, I'm there. I'll do it. Where you call, I'll go. Because it's like you recognize there's nothing, apart from Him we can do nothing. Even Jesus said, like, I do nothing besides what I see Him doing. It's like, man, that's where I want to be. That's where I want to be found, is doing what you're doing, working where you're working, in your grace. It's such a cool place to be in that river of grace when you're doing things and you're sorting out things that are way above your pay grade, and you just see it getting worked out. It's like, man, that's a great place to be. And that's the place we have access to that place, each and every single one of us. For our lives, for the trials that we're facing, we have access to that place. But it's found in Him, in His will. When we lay down our life, our dreams, our desires, and we say, actually, Lord, your will be done, we find ourselves in that place. Amen.